Hello everyone, this is Darion GNB here, and today we're going to be taking a look at Tales of the TMNT. Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is an animated spin-off series released in August of 2024, and is a spin-off of the Mutant Mayhem Ninja Turtles film. The series takes a sort of anthology approach with focusing on two different story arcs, each being about 6 episodes apiece. The first focusing on Bishop, a scientist whose life work got trashed by Super Duper Fly, and she vows to use her mechazoids to destroy all mutants. And the second focusing on a group of fish who became mutated due to Superfly's machine falling into the ocean. They plot to flood the city so they can steal a pearl that once belonged to their reef, in an attempt to rejoin their East River brethren. I absolutely adored this little series. I've seen a few folks try to compare it to the previous Turtle shows, but I don't really think it's that fair of a comparison, as this show just mainly serves as a little side piece of the film series. Regardless for what it is, it's still a fun little show that gives us more of the Turtles we fell in love with from the Mutant Mayhem movie. Something that immediately stood out to me when it came to this show's story is its very weird handle on its own continuity. Between both of the story arcs this season focuses on, it feels like they try to go out of their way to make it not really connect to the movies in any strong way. The first story arc with Bishop is presented with it being told through Leo writing out a comic book when he's bored and his brothers are away. And the second is presented through the lens of Raph telling an exaggerated tale of a flood that they experienced not too long ago. The reason this is so weird is because the story arcs themselves hint and allude to the various characters coming back into play at some point in the future. But because none of the things presumably happened, it all just feels very strange. On top of that, the stories themselves and the characters they introduce are such fun and interesting additions to the TMNT mythos, that them potentially not being a canon part of this little film series kinda just feels like a waste. The main gimmick of this season is splitting the Turtles up and sending them on their own little solo ventures, which in regards to this specific iteration of the Turtles, I think is very much needed. In my original review of Mutant Mayhem, I expressed my gratitude that they wrote the Turtles as kind of a unit. With them being on the same wavelength most of the time, it never felt like one or two were overshadowing the other, giving them all equal importance. But at the cost of that, we didn't really get to express or show the individuality of these Turtles in any meaningful way. That doesn't make the writing for them in the movie bad, as I still very much enjoyed what they did with them, but I'm just emphasizing it here as it's an element that the show makes great usage of. The writing and appeal of the movie as a whole was brilliantly carried over for this show. All the stuff like the authentic teenage feel, the cute and witty humor, even the popular cultural references are brought over in a way that doesn't feel forced, and still very much in line with this iteration of the Turtles. To go over the individual arcs, the first, which I'll just call the Bishop arc, sees the Turtles separated after a big battle and scrounging to find each other and evade Bishop's mechazoids. Something that's automatically appealing to me is seeing how the brothers try to adapt without the others to back them up. I feel like this show next to Rise really handles the brothers' dynamic the best, at least to me personally, because you can really see how much they care about each other and respect each other's skills and quirks. Leo tries to think like Donnie and track the other's phones and whereabouts. Mikey tries to think like Leo and strategize. Raph tries to think like Mikey and joke to distract his enemies. And Donnie tries to think like Raph and just let his rage and aggression take over. It's a cute way of showing how much they rely on each other's strengths. This arc also adds others from the TMNT mythos, on top of the likes of Bishop and the Earth Protection Force. Others like Pigeon Pete, Metalhead, and even the Purple Dragons. I love Pigeon Pete being here because I just appreciate mutants from the 2012 show getting some appreciation. Metalhead was also pretty sweet, but it's kind of fucked up how he's just destroyed and they toss his ass to the side. The Purple Dragons, I think, were pretty fun as just a little minor street gang. Hunt in particular I thought was fun as a sort of gentle giant who rarely ever actually wants to hurt others. To go over the Turtles for this arc in particular, all of what I loved about them in the movie is still greatly carried over. Leo's adorkable nature was really fun in episode 1, on top of his interactions with April being pretty cute as well. I still hate whenever they ship April with one of these turtles, but this instance still turns out to be the one I'm okay with. Because they don't make Leo out to be a nigh over-obsessive weirdo like 2012 Donatello or Michael Bay Michelangelo, and he's just really awkward about it. April in general is still really fun in this iteration of the Turtles, as she's just constantly given a lot of this awkward energy that's hard not to like.
Leo, you scared the heck out of me! You do not walk up on an unaccompanied young woman in the city!
Yeah, make sure not to piss her off either, because she is not afraid to go for the low blow. Mikey, I think, is pretty fun, but I still think that his personality doesn't stand out as much compared to the others. Yeah, he's still a lovable idiot and a bit of a jokester, but like with Mutant Mayhem, with the others all being pretty much fun and goofy, Mikey still doesn't have much of a leg to stand on. But despite that, he is still pretty enjoyable, and his interactions with Rob the intern were really fun. Seeing him kind of play the straight man to this dude who's obsessed with becoming a mutant was a pretty fun plot for Mikey. I can't help but love and adore this version of Raphael. It's no secret that at this point in my life, I have watched dozens of Turtles content since I was a wee lad. And especially after watching something as fresh as Rise, there are a few things that going forward for the TMNT franchise I just personally don't care for. And Raph learning to subside his anger and lone wolf tendencies and trust his brothers more is one of those things. Not because it's bad, hell, I think the 2012 series did the best job at this. It's just something I don't really need to see going forward in the franchise, as I think it's been done enough. And some of the time when it comes to the stuff like movies and whatever, it always feels super tacked on and contrived. Now, if they manage to do it in a way that feels fresh and unique, I'll shut my mouth. But until then, it's just something I don't care for. I'm bringing this up because I love what the Mutant Mayhem franchise is doing with Raph. Yeah, he still has his anger and aggression, and yeah, he'll shit talk about not needing the others from time to time, but in moments where it really matters, he shows how unapologetic he is about how much he loves his brothers. The whole episode that centered around him was really sweet, as he and Hun kind of bond over the shared pressure of them having to be the strong and tough one to look after everybody else, and it was pretty cute. Donnie I still think is really fun. Something that this show made good usage of, that I think the Mutant Mayhem movie kind of failed to, is the whole sciencey tech nerd aspect of Donnie's character. And I say they made good usage of it because this show made something very apparent, which I love for this iteration. And it's that Donnie isn't a super ultra mega tech whiz, and it's something that just kind of projected onto him by his brothers. And we see how much he doubts himself because of it. It's really interesting, and I also love it just because of how, on a meta level, I guess, it contrasts Rise Donatello, who was basically just Tony Stark. I like how grounded Donnie is in this universe, and how they show he always has more stuff to learn. It's insane how well they did Bishop this season. This is a character that I think has gone far too underutilized since the 2003 series. I wasn't a fan of the 2012 show turning him into an Utrom, as that kind of goes against the whole point of his character, being his nigh irredeemable hatred for mutants and aliens and such, but this version brings us back to the roots while putting a good and unique spin on it. They did a great job at having you emotionally relate to her story, with her being inspired to make robots to benefit amputees like her sister Helena, and watching her spiral to her mutant-hating obsession was really interesting, especially in the way it's routinely challenged throughout the season. She's routinely put on the spot for her hypocritical view of mutations in general, and once it seems like she's on a path of bettering herself after nearly wiping out all of humanity with her mechazoids, once given the opportunity, she stoops right back into her mutant-hating obsession, this time backed up by the Earth Protection Force, and what will presumably lead to her becoming more like her usual scummy and ruthless iterations. This arc as a whole, I think, was just pretty expertly done, with you seeing the differing perspectives on how each of the brothers relay the encounter with Bishop, having fun jabs at each other here and there with differing art styles. And the writing was just really strong and character-focused, and it all culminated into a pretty fun and action-packed final episode. The Bishop arc was just really damn good, and the same can be said for the latter half of the season, which I'll just call the East River arc. The main gimmick for this half of the season is having the Turtles split up, but this time with the mighty Mutanimals by their side. Minus Bebop, Rocksteady, and Mondo Gecko for some reason. This is an aspect of the arc that I find to be weaker than the previous one. With the Bishop arc, it was really fun to see the Turtles work and find different allies to aid them, or even find new enemies that might cause them some trouble. So sticking them with the Mutanimals by comparison just isn't as interesting to me. And that's also due to the fact that I don't find them all that interesting, at least with the few of them we get. Genghis Frog basically did nothing in the movie, so I never had a strong impression of him. So watching him in the episode with Mikey was alright, I guess. The bit with him trying to eat the cat was funny, but otherwise, eh. We get some good stuff with Wingnut and her anxiety, which was alright, and all the stuff with Leo and Pigeon Pete was really fun. As for the Turtles, we don't get much more added onto their characters in comparison to the first half. The most we get is pretty minor stuff with Raph learning to bond with Ray Fillet and Scumbug, Leo learning to be a better leader by listening instead of just constantly barking orders, Donnie opening up about struggling with his emotions, and Mikey kinda has nothing. All this stuff is fine for what it is, but it didn't hit the same level of intrigue for me as seeing all the brothers use each other's methods to help them on their separate journeys like in the Bishop arc. This arc we get a bit more Splinter, and I found him to be just as fun and interesting as he was in the movie. I especially love how we get them paired up with April for a bit, as they've become one of the best duos in the franchise in the last few years for me. Something that kind of stuck out to me in this series when looking at this arc is that I'm kind of surprised more wasn't done with the Turtles being known figures in the city. Like, yeah, they definitely acknowledge the Turtles whenever they show up, and even have friends in the community, but I was a little surprised we didn't get any school shenanigans with them. I don't know, maybe they're just saving it for the second movie. I really dug the East River mutants. I love when newer TMNT media add different mutants to the wider mythos, because I'm always interested to see how they can be utilized in other iterations. But I still love what they did here. They're really easy to empathize with, being fish who were shunned out of their society, like the Turtles initially feared would happen to them back in Mutant Mayhem. I especially love how they, well, mainly Sally and Lee, aren't bad people. They're just trying to take back what is rightfully theirs to be welcomed back into their home they were shut out from. But I especially really like Goldfin and the darker road he starts to embark on, and seeing how much more ruthless he gets with wanting to be on the top with the likes of Street Crook Bad Bernie, to sort of model the lifestyle of big mob bosses he see on TV. By the way, I'm so fucking glad they brought this guy back. He had one of the funniest bits in the first movie for me. While not as intriguing as the Bishop stuff, I still dug Goldfin and all the East River mutants as villains for this arc. Lee was really nice and awkward, and Sally wanting nothing but to provide a safe home for his hundreds of children was a fun running gag. Yeah, Leo's reputation is definitely going to be on the chopping block if people catch wind of him aggressively kicking a pregnant guy in the stomach, as well as...
I think you're a faggot.
This arc as a whole, I think from a storytelling perspective, doesn't match up to the Bishop arc, because it just lacks a lot of that oomph that came with the intrigue of seeing the Turtles' different POVs from the same encounter, and stuff like that. But as a whole, it was still pretty good. The voice acting for this show was also incredible. Almost everything positively I said about the guys that voiced the Turtles in the movie still greatly carried over here. Nicholas Cantu, Brady Noon, Shamon Brown Jr. are all fantastic as Leo, Raph, and Mikey. Although I find it funny how it's extremely apparent Micah Addy, the guy that voices Donnie, hit puberty sometime between recording sessions, because the difference is borderline distracting.
Quick tip, never get into a battle of the wits with a mutated turtle. Ah!
Previously on Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yeah, I did get excited about the Megazoids, so what? If they weren't trying to wipe us out, they'd be amazing.
Sayonara, prepubescent Donatello voice, you will be missed. Io Adebri is again fantastic as April. I'm really shocked they got some of the folks to come back to play some of the Mutanimals. Rose Byrne as Leatherhead, Natasha Demetrio as Wingnut and such. I am so sorry if I butchered that name. But with a few other exceptions like Hannibal Buress as Genghis Frog not being here, and them just reusing audio clips of Post Malone saying random bullshit as Ray Fillet, I think the stuff they did to make up for Jackie Chan not coming back for this show is fucking hilarious. With him speaking exclusively in the Vermin language in the Bishop arc, in an attempt to connect with Scumbug better, and in the East River arc, it's told with Raph voicing over Splinter's lines, and it's honestly really funny. Brady Noon is so good, and the writing for Splinter works really well for this version. It's kind of easy to forget we're just hearing Raph doing a Batman voice, as the lines are written and delivered in a way that still feels very much like Jackie's Splinter from the movie. I absolutely love how they managed to translate Mutant Mayhem's art style into this show. It's not as grungy or dirty, but it still has the right aesthetic of it being like a sketchbook of sorts. A minor gripe I have is that the humans, as well as the baby turtles for the brief bit that we see of them, don't look as ugly. That's unironically something I really dug about Mutant Mayhem, that everything was just kinda nasty and deformed. And it's a shame they didn't decide to carry that over here. And the animation and fight choreography goes so damn hard. The big robot brawl was so good and well choreographed. Watching the turtles scrap with a bunch of discarded parts against the Mechazoids was really cool. Hell, any fight with the Mechazoids in that arc looked smooth as hell. The fight Leo had on the roof, the Donnie train fight was sick as hell, Raph with the purple dragons all kicked ass, and even the Mikey one was pretty decent. But I think the standout fight of the entire show has to be with Goldfin in the East River arc. This little dude kicks ass with using the turtles and their weapons to counter and block their attacks, using the environment to trip them up. Me talking about it won't do it proper justice, but I'm just going to keep filling out this sentence so I can show just a little bit more of it, because come on man, look at this shit. I think this scene had one of the folks from Rise work on it, and dude, you can really fucking tell from how smooth it looks down to the fire-ass choreography. Overall, Tales of the TMNT was a frickin' blast. Again, I don't think it'd be fair to compare this to any other Turtle show, because it doesn't serve the same purpose as those other ones. but for what it is, it provides some fun little expansions and additions to the characters from the movies, while still holding on to the same charm and vibe that made that movie so appealing to begin with. Had two greatly told story arcs that provided very interesting character writing, delivered on giving us fun new characters as well as nice little spins on old ones, widening this iteration's mythos in very interesting ways. It had great voice acting, and it also brilliantly carried over the film's unique visual style, and delivered on some kick-ass animation and fight scenes. It has a bit of a weird handle on its continuity, and the East River arc as a whole isn't as complex or engaging as the Bishop one, but still, this was just a fun little show, and much like the movie it spun off from, it's just a charming little outing for the Turtles, and I can't wait to see more. Okay, if you clearly couldn't tell, that entire section was written and recorded before Season 2 was released, and before I was aware the show would be cancelled. So that marks 2 TMNT shows Nickelodeon throws in the can after 2 seasons. Yay! I'm too lazy to add another large segment to this video, especially considering that there's a bunch of other shit that I want to get to. So I'm just going to cram what few thoughts I have on the second season right here at the end. Something that immediately sticks out about Tales of the TMNT Season 2 is the general structure. Instead of 2 6-episode arcs centering on the Turtles being split up, we instead have 4 3-episode mini arcs centering on the various Turtles. Already, I enjoy the switch up in approach, as before the season dropped, I kind of thought we'd be retreading the same formula introduced in the first season, so this was a neat little mix-up. Something else that became more apparent with this season is I think how this show is going to handle being connected to the movies, and honestly, it makes the show's cancellation even more disappointing, as this show had the potential to really blossom in a unique way compared to other TMNT shows. You see, throughout both seasons, the characters push the sentiment that not much goes on in the Turtles' lives outside of going to high school, which I have a slight issue with, but I'll get to that in just a bit. It's actually through the tales they tell each other and their friends, where we have a lot more connecting threads and an actual continuity forming between them. Despite stuff like Bishop and the East River arcs not actually happening canonically for these Mutant Mayhem Turtles, those events do just bleed over into these new stories the Turtles are telling. That's honestly really fun, and like I said, it makes the cancellation all the more disappointing, because I could imagine that with each new movie, they could potentially tell stories that expand upon certain things with the world and characters, in the same way these 2 seasons expand upon stuff with Superfly's machine, or the various mutants that arise from Baxter Stockman's experiments, etc. As far as the arcs themselves are concerned, I think they're all pretty fun. The main gimmick of this season is instead of having the Turtles separate and make their way around with various allies, it instead centers around each of the respective Turtles not being understood by their brothers. And each arc focuses on them generally coming together and getting a better understanding of each other. While it's not grand, I think the switch up in theme works really well, and the arcs themselves give a lot more time to each Turtle, seeing as each arc is focused on one of them respectively. The first focusing on Raph and his anger issues, or more generally his love for fighting, causing a rift between him and his brothers, leading to him fighting in the Purple Dragon's battle arena, which pits him against his friends and family. The second being about Donnie feeling overlooked as simply being the smart one, with nobody actually paying attention to his interests or expertise. And he's put in the crosshairs of a mad scientist dealing with violent and genetically unstable mutants. The third sees Leo donning a superhero persona and facing off against a mutated cat and his flea henchmen who want to kill Splinter. And Mikey's is about finding his friend Rod, who's been kidnapped, and trying to recover some supposed mutagen he got his hands on. I think all of these arcs are pretty fun. The weakest for me would probably be Leo's, seeing as his character isn't really as developed as well compared to the others. That, as well as the fact that just writing-wise, this one is probably the sloppiest compared to the other ones. This is also the arc that reaffirms that the Turtles literally don't do anything outside of school. Like, I'm sorry, y'all were making these mob bosses and gang members look like a bunch of little bitches 6 months ago. What the hell happened to doing that? It's just kind of lame to think that the Ninja Turtles aren't really doing heroic stuff or crime fighting between films, but it's whatever, I guess. I just know Shredder is going to absolutely rock their shit, and I cannot wait. There really isn't much more I can say about the characters that I haven't already gone over, except that I think this season cemented Mikey and Raph as my favorite Turtles for this specific iteration. This show just continues to make me adore this version of Raphael. Seeing him struggle with his love for fighting and how his brother's disapproval clearly bothers him was pretty sweet. And I again love that they show how much he really cares for them. Mikey's arc I also really enjoyed, with him going through extreme lengths to try to help his deadbeat friend Rod, just because he knows Rod didn't have a good support system like Mikey does with his brothers, so he doesn't want to give up on helping him because he knows his brothers would do the same for him. This shit is so sweet, man. It honestly made me love this variation of Mikey so much more. They brought over Bebop, Rocksteady, and Mondo Gecko, which is pretty sweet, carrying on the tradition of keeping the characters mute because we couldn't get the actual voice actor as well. But in regards to the story, I think it works, and it was cool seeing this universe's Purple Dragons come back. Donnie's arc utilizes various mutants from the series, most notably Toka and Razor, and even the mad scientist who created them being Dr. Jordan Perry from the Secret of the Ooze movie, which I think was pretty cool. The character writing for all the newbies was also really good. I really enjoyed Scratch and his flea minions. Scratch was a really fun and pretty unconventional and goofy bad guy. Even his assistant LaFleur I think was pretty entertaining. The show continues to kill it with the animation, and especially the fight choreography. All the mutant battles in the first arc were pretty cool. Seeing the Turtles face off with Perry's mutants was a highlight, on top of so much more. The voice cast again was solid, with all the newer folks doing a pretty good job. It's a shame the plug was pulled on this show, as it really did have the potential to grow even further into something cool for the Turtles franchise. At least I think so, anyway. But yeah, this show was pretty cool. So, with all that said, if you agree or disagree with anything I've said in this video, let me know right down there in the comments below. Also, be sure to like and subscribe. This has been Darion GNB, and take care.